The fashion industry's AI takeover was announced before it happened. In March 2025, H&M made an announcement that barely registered as news. The Swedish retail giant, one of the largest fashion companies on Earth, said it would be creating artificial intelligence twins of 30 of its models, digital replicas, built from their likeness, to be used in marketing campaigns, social media posts, and brand imagery whenever the company needed them. With the model's permission, of course, and with compensation negotiated through their agency, paid each time the twin was used. The models themselves seemed fine with it. One described her AI replica as like me, without the jet lag. The fashion press wrote about it. The unions objected. A few people posted on social media. And then, as most news does, it moved on. But here's what I want you to notice. Not the technology itself. Not the ethics debate that followed. Something more subtle. H&M did not ask whether AI could replace models. They announced that it would. They did not present a pilot program. They presented a fait accompli, 30 models, AI twins, already in production. The decision had been made. The future had been chosen. The only question left for everyone else was how to respond to something that had already happened. That is the structure of almost every major AI announcement in fashion over the last 2 years. And while those announcements were being made, while everyone was debating the ethics of digital model twins, something else was already happening. Quietly, without a press release, without a spokesperson quote about human-centric approaches. Understanding the difference between those two things is the most important thing you can take from this video. Let me tell you about Nike first. Far from the public view of product drops and celebrity endorsements, Nike has been systematically integrating AI into every facet of its global operations for years. Analysts have described it as a quiet revolution, machine learning embedded in supply chain, generative design tools in product development, biomechanical data sciences redefining how performance gear is built. A proprietary AI model trained on athlete data described internally as a competitive moat. None of this was announced as a takeover. None of it came with a press release about AI replacing workers. It was framed, consistently, carefully, as innovation, as performance optimization, as serving athletes better. And while that framing was in place, something else was also happening. A 2024 report identified Nike as one of the most data-hungry companies in the fashion industry, collecting 18 distinct data points per user, including potentially sensitive information like photos and videos. A class action lawsuit was filed in California, alleging that Nike secretly used session replay software to record the keystrokes, mouse clicks, and electronic communications of website visitors without their consent. Critics argued that most users were largely unaware of how their personal data was fueling sophisticated marketing and personalization engines, creating a significant power imbalance. Nike built one of the most sophisticated AI operations in fashion. By the time anyone was paying attention, it was already deeply embedded. No announcement, no debate, no headlines about workers being replaced. Just a quiet revolution, executed at scale, while the conversation was happening somewhere else. Now compare that to H&M. Same industry, same technology, completely different strategy. H&M made the announcement. H&M became the story. H&M absorbed the controversy. The technology is almost identical. The announcement is completely different, and that difference is the entire argument of this video. Now let me give you the numbers, real ones. The International Labor Organization says 29% of jobs in traditional garment design and manual pattern making are at risk due to rising automation and AI adoption. McKinsey and Business of Fashion's State of Fashion 2026 report says that by 2030, 30% of employee time across the fashion industry could be automated by generative AI. The AI and fashion market is projected to reach nearly $10 billion by 2030, growing at almost 40% annually. These are the numbers that travel. These are the numbers that make people quietly update their CVs at night. But here is the number that almost never appears in the same breath. According to McKinsey's State of Fashion 2026 report, up to 90% of AI initiatives in fashion fail to scale beyond the pilot phase. Not because the technology doesn't work, Because the underlying data infrastructure, the organizational capability, and the human readiness simply are not there yet. 90%. And here is one more. Only 18% of fashion industry professionals globally possess adequate AI literacy. Not advanced skills. Adequate. So the industry is being told that 30% of its work is about to be automated, and 82% of the people doing that work do not have the foundational knowledge to evaluate what is actually coming. That asymmetry is not an accident. In April 2026, a philosopher named Carissa Valise gave a TED Talk called Beware the Power of Prediction. She is a TED Fellow and an Oxford philosopher who studies AI ethics. And her argument goes like this. We tend to associate predictions with knowledge, but Valise argues that predictions are not primarily about knowledge. They are attempts to grab power. She traces this back to Oedipus, to Roman emperors who banned prophets not because prophecy was false, but because it was dangerous. A prediction that is believed changes how people behave. And when enough people change their behavior based on a prediction, the prediction comes true. Not because it was accurate, but because believing it made it so. Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Shiller made a version of the same argument decades ago. He documented how fears about machines replacing human labor contributed to 19th century economic downturns, how science fiction reinforced the incorrect belief that automation caused the Great Depression. And he warned that economic hardships from recessions are mistaken for the job-destroying effects of machines, which creates pessimistic responses as self-fulfilling prophecies. Scott Galloway, writing in May 2026, argued that AI washing, using AI as the explanation for layoffs actually driven by inflation, tariffs, and overhiring, is creating a narrative that will produce the very outcomes it claims to describe. In fashion, this dynamic is already visible. When H&M announces AI twins, it signals to every other company that this is where things are going. It normalizes the direction. It gives everyone who follows cover. The announcement is the power move. The technology is almost secondary. Now look at the others operating in the silence. Shein produces an estimated 6,000 new styles per day. Its entire operation runs on algorithmic trend prediction, scanning social media, search data, and consumer behavior in real time. No runway shows, no traditional design cycles, just data to production, continuously, at a scale that has no precedent in the history of fashion. No announcement, no controversy, just the operation itself, quietly dismantling every assumption the fashion industry had. Zalando's deployment of an AI-powered fashion assistant across 25 markets in 2024 led to a more than 20% increase in product clicks and a 40% surge in wishlist additions. The AI is reshaping the relationship between customers and products in a way that makes certain human roles, stylists, buyers, merchandisers making intuition-based decisions, quietly less necessary. LVMH topped the IMD Future Readiness Indicator for fashion in 2025. They have been deploying AI across 75 brands for years, in supply chain, in demand forecasting, in quality control. No announcement, because luxury protects its mystique by not revealing the machinery behind it. The machine operates invisibly, while the story stays intact. Now here is where the counter-argument has to be made, because it is real and it matters. The Yale Budget Lab has been tracking AI's actual impact on the labor market every month since ChatGPT launched. As of March 2026, their conclusion is striking. There has not yet been a meaningful change in unemployment for workers in jobs with high AI exposure. The picture that emerges from their data is one that largely reflects stability, not major disruption. Anthropic's own research found that actual AI adoption is just a fraction of what AI tools are theoretically capable of performing. Even Anthropic, the company that makes Claude, says the disruption is slower than theoretical. So the data says stability. The structural logic says risk. Which one do you trust? Here is the problem with trusting the data. Over 1/3 of all job postings are estimated to be fake. 80% of employment recruiters have admitted their company posts jobs that are filled or simply do not exist. These are not forgotten postings. Most ghost job ads are intentional. Employers use them to project an appearance of growth to investors, to collect applicant data to mine and potentially sell, to make their company appear viable during a hiring freeze. And most chillingly, 62% of hiring managers have admitted using ghost job ads explicitly to make current employees feel replaceable. To increase productivity through manufactured anxiety, these postings are inflating the job vacancy numbers that economists and the Bureau of Labor Statistics use to assess the health of the labor market. As one legal expert argued in the Columbia Law Review, ghost jobs can corrupt the economic data that inform critical nationwide policy decisions, including the size and timing of Federal Reserve interest rate cuts. The stability the data shows may be partly a mirage, built on a signal that is itself being deliberately distorted. At least 5 state legislatures are now actively reviewing bills to crack down on ghost job postings. The legal framework is beginning to catch up, but the damage to how workers understand their own replaceability has already been done. Now here is the voice that cuts through all of it. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, said in 2025 that up to half of all entry-level white-collar jobs will dissolve within 5 years. That unemployment could reach 10 to 20%. He said, "We, as the producers of this technology, have a duty and an obligation to be honest about what is coming." Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, has said that AI will have the capability to replace many jobs in 2026. That every 7 months, AI gains the ability to perform tasks roughly twice as long as before. Goldman Sachs called AI the big story in 2026 in labor. The business case for AI in fashion is documented and proven. Fashion companies scaling AI adoption report 35 to 45% reductions in inventory costs. The economic incentive to deploy exists. The tools exist. The question is not if, it is when. And the when is being shaped right now by announcements, by narratives, and by the behavior those narratives produce. So here is where we land. Nike built its AI operation quietly and called it innovation. Shein automated the entire creative and production cycle and called it speed. Zalando embedded AI into the customer relationship and called it personalization. LVMH deployed AI across 75 luxury brands and called it operational excellence. None of them announced a takeover. And yet the structural effect on fashion employment is almost certainly more advanced in those operations than in H&M's 30 AI model twins. The announcements are not where the change is happening. They are where the narrative is being constructed. And the narrative shapes behavior in ways that can make itself true. Meanwhile, ghost job postings are manufacturing anxiety in the workforce, making workers feel replaceable by design, corrupting the data that economists use to understand what is actually happening. Refibered won $300,000 from eBay's Circular Fashion Fund in 2025 for using AI to classify textile materials for recycling. In the Loop is using AI to identify and price secondhand clothing at scale. Alternew is connecting brands with local repair services. These are AI applications that create roles and open new categories of work in fashion. They received a fraction of the coverage that H&M's announcement did. The stories we tell about AI in fashion shape the jobs that exist in fashion. Which stories get told, and by whom, and for what purpose, is not a neutral process. That is the question worth sitting with. Not will AI take fashion jobs, but who benefits from you believing it will before it actually does? And what decisions are being made about your future, right now, that you do not have enough information to evaluate clearly? Because that is the real asymmetry, not between humans and machines, between the people making the announcements and the people those announcements are about. Subscribe and drop a comment below. When you read a headline about AI replacing jobs in your industry, what do you feel? Because I think that feeling is exactly what someone is counting on. I will see you in the next one.